Hey classmates, first I want to thank you for helping me with my week 6 peer review project. I know there are a lot of projects to view, and I'm happy you chose mine to review. Please let me know if there are any suggestions that would help me with my final project in the comments section below. I'll be removing some parts like this one for the final presentation. I'll be going over my project in 2 parts. For the first part, I will be discussing what multi-drug resistant tuberculosis is and how it is different and more difficult to treat compared to a typical case of tuberculosis. I will also discuss how certain strains of Mdr Tb can also be extreme drug-resistant tuberculosis, and what can cause an already difficult strain of tuberculosis to become even more difficult to treat. I'll discuss the second part at a later time. Let's get started. Before we can discuss what Mdr Tb is, let's quickly review what TB is. TB is caused by the bacteria Mycobacterium tuberculosis, which is spread from an infected person to a non-infected person through the air, be it by coughing, talking, sneezing, or singing. Droplets containing the bacteria are then inhaled into the non-infected person's lungs, causing infections. There are 2 different types of tuberculosis. The first is latent infection. This person can still have a positive TB test, but cannot transmit the infection to anyone else. The second type is active TB. This is where a person is able to infect others. Now that we discussed what TB is, what is Mdr Tb? Mdr Tb is a multi-drug resistant form of tuberculosis. This occurs when the 2 most common drugs are not able to be used as the organism has become resistant to them. Those 2 drugs are isoniazid and rifampin, making Mdr Tb harder to treat than a typical case of tuberculosis. So how does this happen? This commonly happens when the medication we talked about earlier are not taken correctly when treating the original infection of tuberculosis. The most common reason is because a patient doesn't complete their full course of treatment, was given the wrong treatment, or the supply of the drug is no longer available, such as a drug shortage during an outbreak. There is also the different type of drug-resistant TB. This is Xdr Tb, which is the extreme drug-resistant tuberculosis. This is similar to Mdr Tb, where the patient is unable to take isoniazid and rifampin, but is also unable to take fluoroquinolones as well as any second-line drug, such as kanamycin. Let's move on to the second part of my presentation. Now that we have an idea what Mdr Tb and Xdr Tb is, how do you treat, prevent, and more importantly, cure tuberculosis? I will be discussing the various types of procedures available in certain economic classes, the cost estimated for start to finish treatment of Mdr Tb and Xdr Tb, how long the procedures for typical TB treatments are, and how that could potentially affect the outcome of a person contracting Mdr Tb and Xdr Tb. I will also discuss how the governments of certain countries are viewing the growing problem of undiagnosed tuberculosis, Mdr Tb, and Xdr Tb, and the social economical barriers that many patients face that is exacerbating the problem of Mdr Tb and Xdr Tb. Thankfully, there are ways to treat Mdr Tb and Xdr Tb. There needs to be just the right combination of drugs. The recommended regimen is up to 4 drugs that Mycobacterium tuberculosis can potentially be treated with. There are 5 groups of medication that can be chosen. The doctor will look at many options, as well as the efficiency, cost, and safety of the medication. Some treatments can be as short as 9 to 12 months, and there are longer options that are no longer the go-to treatment for Mdr Tb, due to the cycle taking up to 21 months to complete. Many patients simply were not able to stay compliant during 21 months worth of treatment, making it possible that they would become drug resistant to even more medications, limiting the treatment available. According to the World Health Organization, a typical case of tuberculosis can cost $17,000 to treat. That sounds pretty expensive. Not compared to a case of Mdr Tb, which can run you up to $134,000. And that is still cheap compared to Xdr Tb, which is almost $430,000 to treat. Most of this can be covered by health insurance, but many patients in countries with less than stellar health insurance simply cannot afford the treatment. Though all countries have Mdr Tb, there are 3 countries that have the highest percentages. Those are Russia, China, and India. This is largely due to close living proximity and high populations of people. America also has 5 states that have the highest tuberculosis count. Those are California, Texas, New York, and Florida. Again, high populated areas that people live in close proximity to each other. Mdr and Xdr Tb are preventable, as long as patients who have tested positive for tuberculosis are able to receive the treatment they need. Educating the public and patients' families is vital, as they will need support to complete the treatment. This also means that access to treatment needs to be easily accessible, and it would be in the best interest of all if the government continues to take tuberculosis seriously and helps ensure patients that need the treatment are able to receive it. Thank you again for taking time to review my rough draft. I will continue to work on my project with the tips and suggestions you give me. Good luck on week 6.